Hi there, my name's Christina Hildebrand, and for those of you who don't know me, I am the founder and president of A Voice for Choice Advocacy, and we educate, advocate, and empower people to know their health rights in California. Tonight, I am going to be talking about how we are leading the way in California to religious exemptions for vaccine mandates, and how we're really the only organization that is advancing this on multiple fronts and on every front possible that we have. So to get started, I'm going to go through the different ways that we are working on religious exemptions. So the first one is our religious exemption litigation. So for those of you who don't know, we have an active litigation challenging the elimination of religious exemptions for children in California schools and daycares. That was a challenge to SB 277. So SB 277 was passed in 2015, and it removed all non-medical exemptions. And our lawsuit is in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. It was dismissed in the lower court, which we weren't surprised by because in California we didn't expect it to be, accepted in the lower courts. But it is currently in the Ninth Circuit, and we will be putting together our final briefing. We put a brief in the appeals court. We got a response from the state, and we will be putting in our final brief by the end of January. Now, some exciting things have happened over the summer and specifically in the last month on this. So there was a Supreme Court ruling that ordered Miller versus McDonald, which is a New York case, to be reconsidered and thrown back to the Second Circuit Appeals Court in light of Mahmoud versus Taylor. And Mahmoud versus Taylor is a really important case. We have it in our filings already. It was affirmed in the summer this year, and it was a case in New York State where there were multiple parents who, from many different religions, who said that they wanted to have a say over the religious upbringing when it comes to the teaching of sex education and gender orientation, and that they wanted to know what was being taught, and they also wanted to say whether their children could be opted out. The lower courts in that case said, oh, if you don't like how your children are being educated in public school, then you can go right ahead and homeschool. And what the appeals court said, and I believe it was the Supreme Court said, but in the final ruling of that was that no, the parents had the right to make those decisions based on their religious beliefs, and that homeschooling was not equal. So you couldn't just say, oh, but you have the right to homeschool, so you're all set. And that's something that we have heard over and over in the vaccine cases in California is, oh, but you have the right to homeschool. So you can choose your vaccination status. You don't have to vaccinate. We're not forcing you to vaccinate, but that you can go homeschool. And the key piece here is we didn't know if Mahmoud would apply to vaccine cases until this Miller versus McDonald case, which is a case of some Amish school children going to an Amish school that were allowing religious exemptions in New York. Religious exemptions were taken away in New York State. And the lower courts and the Second Circuit said, you don't have a case. Your children have to, the state can have a non-religious exemption, just medical exemptions, and your kids can be homeschooled. The Supreme Court, they didn't hear the case, but they did what's called cert, and they sent that back to the Second Circuit Court of Appeal, and they said that they had to reconsider it in light of Mahmoud. In other words, Mahmoud, this case where parents have religious rights in the upbringing of their children in schools, and that homeschooling is not equal, should apply to vaccine cases. So what's going to happen now is that it has been sent back to the Second Court of Appeal. And there, the Court of Appeal has one of two options. It can either go with, yes, this applies, and therefore there have to be exemptions, religious exemptions for vaccines, or it could find a different way to get out of that. But the cool thing or the great thing is that Mahmoud, when it was put forward over the summer, we had the chance to put a brief together, and we included it in that. And so it is already in our case. So when our case is in front of the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, they will know that the Supreme Court has thrown it back to the Second Circuit and has said, you must consider Mahmoud. And so our hope is that we will get this Ninth Court Circuit will already have seen that and will say, okay, we have to take Mahmoud into consideration, and therefore you cannot dismiss this case, and you have to look at it. And one of the key things is it has to have more scrutiny. And with that more scrutiny, the other side, the state, has to come up with more reasons why this is constitutional not to have a religious exemption. And we truly believe that we will be able to win this case. So this is huge. It's a real forward motion, and really putting some oomph behind our case. And we're super excited about this. I've been asked, how long will this take? When will we have a religious exemption? Court cases take so long. We've been at this since 2023. We reworded, reiterated, amended our complaint 3 times before it got to this point. My hope is that the appeals court sends it back and we go through, but we will have to go through depositions and declarations and looking at, all the documentation if it does move forward. So, will we have it by September of 2026? I would love that to be the case, but I don't have a magic ball and I can't tell you. But with what I'm telling you tonight, really that we are the organization that is moving forward in California on all these fronts for religious exemptions, I do think there is a good chance that in 2026 we will see a religious exemption, or at least be on the way there for 2027 to have a religious exemption to school vaccine mandates in California. I will also mention we do have a case which we have not publicized yet that hopefully will move forward in 2026, which is a case to bring back the religious exemption for SB 792, which was a law put in place again in 2015, which required daycare workers for the pertussis vaccine and the measles vaccine to have those vaccinations without a religious exemption, just as a medical exemption. And that actually should be an easier win because under the Constitution and under the Civil Rights Act, you have to have a religious exemption for employees. And so we've been looking for a plaintiff for this, and I think we finally found the ideal plaintiff. She does have to go through some steps like filing a complaint with the EEOC and other things that will allow her to set up having a lawsuit with us on that issue. And therefore we're hoping, and that includes, parent volunteers, those types of things. Anyone working or volunteering in a daycare has to have those vaccinations, and there is no exemption other than a medical exemption. That's the religious exemption litigation. Next, moving on to legislative advocacy. So this is talking about what we do in the Capitol. So Voice for Choice advocacy came out of SB 277, but we do have a much broader mission, which is to educate, advocate, and empower people to know their health rights in California. That includes, I'm going to say, we were MAHA, Make America Healthy Again, before MAHA even existed. We have brought bills forward that remove toxins. We've supported bills that remove PFAS, neonics, bisphenol. We have ensured that there's labeling on products so that you can make informed consent. We have regular meetings with legislators and their staffers. We have an amazing legislative team. It's me and Leah and April. April we hired about a year ago so that she could be in the Capitol at least once a week when they're in session and really get those relationships going. And I will say, we for the last 9 years have put forward a religious exemption bill during this period around the holidays where legislators are picking up bills. Not because we thought that it would be picked up, and if it was, it would be an incredible fight that we would have to have, but because we want to continue educating legislators on the vaccine issue, on what's been going on, and that there are constitutional rights to religious exemptions. You may have heard other organizations talk about bringing a personal belief exemption back, about making better medical exemptions, sort of broadening the medical exemption again. We've had those conversations with legislators, with Democrat senators, and we just don't think it's going to happen this coming year. What you have to realize is any of those bills that get brought forward, they have to have majority support throughout the legislative process, and a lot of Democrats still, even with COVID, are super for vaccines. And then ultimately it has to get to the governor's desk and be signed by the governor. And we saw bills this year that vetoed, things like Senator Ben Allen had an amazing bill that would have required all PFAS, those are forever chemicals, to be removed from product in California. And he worked with the key stakeholders. He really had great conversations. Clearly, the bill was supported on a bipartisan level. It made it to the governor's desk, and the governor vetoed it. And the only reason that I can think of that the governor vetoed it is that Governor Newsom is wanting to run as president in 2028. And therefore, he's looking through that lens at everything. And I just don't think that there's going to be a single vaccine bill that even something like broadening medical exemptions that he wants to sign, because he feels that he is really going up against Trump, against RF Kennedy Jr. and HHS. And he created the Western, he and other states created the Western Health Alliance, and they have taken over, CDPH has taken over vaccine policy. And so we're seeing that policy come out of California, and it is not adhering to the federal recommendations. So, we had RSV, COVID, and flu vaccinations be required for everyone. The COVID vaccination is no longer required for children or healthy adults on a federal level. California put that aside. We've seen the hepatitis B vaccine not being recommended for on the first day of birth for babies of non-hepatitis B mothers, and moved to the 2-month schedule. California is not adhering to that. And so when you have these, really pro-vaccine policies that Governor Newsom is pushing forward, it just, putting forward a personal belief exemption bill or putting for a medical exemption broadening bill just isn't something that we see happening. And so that's really why we are pushing for the religious exemption bill, because we do see that having a way forward here in California. And we can see that, those people that have sincere religious beliefs should not be required to have their children vaccinated in order to be in school. As I said, we don't see this moving forward in the legislature, but that doesn't mean to say we don't have conversations and we don't keep the conversations going with the Democrats and with the Republicans. But with our supermajority, we just don't see that these bills moving forward. Something that we did a few years ago, probably 2018-19, was to put together a religious rights coalition. And so this was founded by a Voice for Choice Advocacy as well as other partner organizations. And it really was to build this coalition and to have a group of people, whether it was faith-based groups or religious leaders or educators or just individuals, that support legislation protecting religious and conscious belief health decisions. And that's beyond just vaccine mandates in schools, but just in general, that if you have religious rights, that you have the right to have those in your health decisions. And we're opposing coercion, discrimination, and segregation. And this was just a group of people, a group of organizations that support this, so that when we do need to put forward support on legislation, litigation, those types of things, we can reach out to those groups and we can get that list put forward. So if you do know of any faith-based groups or religious leaders or educators that are interested in supporting that, please do go to religiousrightscoalition.org and have them at the bottom. You can choose who you are and have them submit those because it is really a strong support that just generates and shows that there is broad backing for religious exemptions. The other area that we are supporting is federal legislation. So on the federal level, we have the GRACE Act, which a Voice for Choice Advocacy was requested to support and endorse. We are one of the key organizations backing that bill. It was Congressman Greg Steube, that brought this forward, and it would prohibit federal funding to schools denying religious exemptions. So that is public schools or private schools that take federal funding would, and it's specific to, really looks at California, New York, Maine, and Connecticut, where we don't have religious exemptions allowed for school attendance, athletics, and extracurriculars. And it would say, you're not getting any federal funding if you do not have a religious exemption. We're working with the legislature here. We don't think that this will move forward in this session. And the reason for that is twofold. One, in the way federal legislation works is you have to have it in the House and in the Senate, the same bill, concurrently running and to move forward. And we don't have a Senate bill at this time. The other thing that happens is that very often legislatures will do what's called float a bill. And so they will put a bill forward just to see what opposition they're going to get, what other language they need to incorporate into it. I will say that while we endorse this, we definitely want to have this bill move forward. We currently don't endorse the current language. And the reason for that is that and we want amendments, is that it doesn't currently include daycares or colleges. Colleges aren't an issue for in California because our colleges are not covered by SB 277, but daycare is covered by SB 277. And so what it would mean is that vaccines are required for daycare and they're not required for school, which, in and of itself is the same because vaccines are required under 2 years old. The majority of vaccines are when they're required. And so we are working with the legislature on this to expand it and to amend it so that it does cover all of it and that there aren't any loopholes here. The way we see this progressing is that we will see this bill not move forward in 2025, but in 2026 it will be reintroduced when the new legislative session happens. And then hopefully he will have garnered the support of senators or of a senator to bring the bill forward in the Senate as well. And then once it has both bills, it can move forward. The place that we would really ask you to do something is to call your legislatures on the GRACE Act, and in California, that would be your Congress and your senators. I understand for the most part, those are Democrats here in California, and they are not going to be open to this, but just having those conversations is important, and making sure that there is the knowledge of this act and wanting to move it forward, and that there is a constitutional right, which is what all of this religious exemption for vaccine mandates is based on, is your First Amendment rights, that there is a constitutional right to a religious exemption. And so the other piece of this is what we see happening with this is if this moves forward and it is passed into law, we see one of two things happening. Either it will be sort of quietly slipped into place in California that there will be a religious exemption. Obviously, we won't allow it to be quiet. We will make it very well known. But similar to what happened with the trans athletes. So Donald Trump, President Trump said that there was an executive order that you couldn't have trans athletes in sports. On the high school level and the college level. Well, what's happened here in California is they sort of found a way around that yes, in female sports, all medals will be given to females, but if a trans athlete, biological male, competes, that athlete will also be given the same medal, but that it doesn't prevent females from getting the medals and therefore moving on to get college scholarships and be recruited by colleges and stuff like that. And so I could see something similar happening with the religious exemption. Not sure how exactly it would work out, but sort of this oh, yep, we've got a loophole here, and we'll make this happen. The other thing that I could see happening is that the Attorney General, supported by Governor Newsom, files a lawsuit against the federal government, against Donald Trump, and says that, they can't stop giving school funding based on not having religious exemptions for vaccines. If that case happens, it won't preempt our lawsuit because we're sort of moving in this direction. That would be coming in this direction. And we basically, I would give it a pretty good shot because the civil rights attorney that would take on that case from President Trump is the same lawyer that fought Newsom during COVID and fought for some of those churches that were shut down and humongously fined. And so, I give her a pretty good shot at winning against the state of California on this one. So it'll be interesting to see, how this progresses, when it progresses. Again, I think there's momentum here. It's just whether it gets through. Federal legislation is much harder to pass through and doesn't get through as much as state legislation does. So I think this is another, it's all building. It's all movement in the right direction. It's all making loud noises about religious exemptions and the requirement that there should be always a religious exemption when it comes to vaccine mandates. The next area we're engaged in is the Religious Liberty Commission. So this commission was established by an executive order by President Trump on May 1st, 2025, and it's under the U.S. Department of Justice. The commission advises the White House Faith Office and Domestic Policy Council, and it examines threats to religious freedom and conscious protections. And they have had a number of hearings, I think it's 3 or 4 hearings on different issues. So one of them was on the military and religious beliefs. One of them was on education, not vaccine mandates, but specifically on, for example, being not allowed in school when you're wearing religious sayings on your t-shirts during COVID, on masks, those types of things, and being stopped from being able to go to school because of your religious beliefs, or being discriminated against because of your religious beliefs. We do believe that in February of next year, or early next year, early part of next year, that there will be one specifically on vaccine mandates and religious beliefs, and a Voice for Choice Advocacy has submitted testimony, and we're really hoping that our plaintiffs and our lawyers will be allowed to speak on the panel when that happens. And so that's another place that we're engaging. Again, this is an area where usually after they've had a hearing, they then put together a report that gets reported back to President Trump and the White House Faith Office, as well as the DOJ. And so it is a place that we're really hoping that it again will make noise. It'll show that yes, religious exemptions are required to be in place when it comes to vaccine mandates, when it comes to school. And finally, another area, and probably the place that we have helped most with, actively helped most with religious exemption, is with our religious exemption writing workshop, which I led during COVID. I probably did 50 or 60 of these live workshops. Each of them had anywhere from 100 to 1,000 people on them. And we have helped thousands of employees and college students to get their religious exemptions accepted. One thing I will say is that I really emphasize, if you're writing a religious exemption, you have to write it yourself, because the only person that has your religious beliefs is you. And so that religious exemption writing workshop allows you to, I take you through how to write your own religious exemption. And we haven't had any that have been denied, other than in clinical requirements. I'll get into that in for a little bit. But from an employee standpoint and from a college standpoint, and we've had 100% success rate, just people doing the workshop and submitting them. The one place that I will say that we have had struggles, and I would say they've rejected, but we've gotten them accepted finally, is with clinical placements. So clinical placements are when college students are taking a healthcare related degree. So whether it's dentistry or medical student or nursing, or even, speech pathology, working with autistic kids, hearing, speech, those types of things. And as part of their education, they go for a semester. They are in, or maybe it may be more than a semester, but for at least a semester, they are in a clinical environment, and they follow clinicians around, or they do some hands-on work with these types of patients or students. And what we're finding is that the clinical site directors, so these are organized through the university by a clinical site director, and they can have a religious exemption at the university, but at the clinical site, they're being told they cannot have a religious exemption. However, the loophole there, or the place that we have found that we've been able to convince them that yes, they have to accept the religious exemption, is that all of those clinical placements have employees, and the employees under the Civil Rights Act have to have a religious exemption for their employees. And so when you have employees with a religious exemption and students without a religious exemption, that's considered discrimination, and therefore you cannot have that. I will say that what we struggle with is that the clinical site directors at the universities are very unwilling to share the information. If we can get the student speaking directly to the clinical site, we get them through. If it's not, it's up to getting the clinical site director to have that conversation with the clinical site, and they're reluctant to do it we have our lawyers are willing to write a letter that has been effective, and every time that we've proceeded with this, it has been effective. It may have been at the last moment, but it has been effective in gaining those clinical placements with a religious exemption because they don't want to deal with the lawsuit. And we've seen, with COVID, there have been many, many lawsuits where uh, colleges and healthcare facilities have had to pay out millions of dollars to people where they would not either give a religious exemption or accommodate a religious exemption. And so this is a place that we have been successful. And my suggestion is, if you are doing a clinical, if you're going into something that has a clinical, please reach out to us. We're happy to help you. Do it sooner rather than later. Like, if you know you're going to be in a clinical next semester, definitely get in touch with us early on so we can help you with this. And this is, how this matters now is that we can help families where religious exemptions are allowed, but it also opens up that discussion and really allows us to educate people in what their religious rights are. So, Voice for Choice Advocacy's commitment, we're really committed to restoring religious exemptions in California schools, but we're committed to doing more than that. We are, as I say, throwing spaghetti at the wall. We really want to ensure that we are working at every opportunity to get religious freedoms against vaccine mandates. We're working through the courts, the legislature, coalitions, direct advocacy, and there's really no other organization in California that is doing all of that. There are some that are doing things here and there, but there's really no other organization in California, and I would claim nationally, that is really working on all these different fronts to get religious exemptions back into schools for vaccine mandates. So what can you do to support these efforts? I would say, share our efforts, share this video when I send the URL out. Please share it and share it with friends, family, faith-based individuals and organizations, and just support us by making our organization known for this work. Sign on and share the Religious Rights Coalition. So go to religiousrightscoalition.org and please sign on there. Get faith-based organization, religious leaders, educators to sign on there as well. Contact your federal legislators and ask them to support the GRACE Act, even if they're Democrats. Just send them a letter, make it known that this is out there and that it's important. They should be supporting the Constitution, and that's what this is based on. It's based on our constitutional rights. And, Democrats, when you push them to the Constitution, they agree that, yes, we have constitutional rights. Yes, we should have religious rights, but it's that bridging that gap. And so any education you can do there. And then the last thing I would say is, donate to a Voice for Choice advocacy to support our legal efforts, to support our legislative team. We really have that is our biggest expense. And, we are committed to this. And I really believe that in 2026 that we will be moving this forward. We do have two organizations. We have a Voice for Choice Advocacy, and if you go to that donate button, if you go to our website, there's a donate button on the top, or you can just put in /donate. There are two organizations. There's a Voice for Choice, which is our 501c3 that does only education and also supports the litigation. 501c4 is our lobbying efforts and also supports the litigation. So if you want to support our legal efforts, you can give to either one. If you're giving a large donation, so with the removal of itemized taxes for donations, if you're giving $20, $50, $100, it doesn't matter which one you give to. If you're giving those larger donations, please do give them to a Voice for Choice because you will be able to get them tax deducted. The other thing that I will say is we do have a matching donation of $50,000 up to $50,000 by the end of this year. So if you do donate, please donate before the end of the year so we can get that match. And also, if you have an employer that matches your donations, we will get 4 times the donation because we'll get your donation, we'll get your employee matching grant, and our donation matching will match both of those. So we will get 4 times the donation. So please do that, and any amount, however small, however large, is appreciated, and we'll do something for you. So those are the presentation I have for this evening, and I really uh, hope that that helped show you how a Voice for Choice advocacy is coming at this religious exemption. We do believe it is the way forward in California, much more than a medical exemption or broadening of the medical exemption or bringing a personal belief exemption, both of which would be done through the California legislature, and we just don't think that is a viable option. If we support those bills, 100%, we would support them, but we really feel that religious rights are the way forward. And if we can't win these now, if we can't win these lawsuits or get these bills passed now on a federal level in 2026, I don't know when we'll ever be able to do it. With the Supreme Court the way it is, with the lawsuits that are moving forward, with the federal legislation that's moving forward, with President Trump really being focused on these religious rights, now is the time. Now is the time. And a Voice for Choice advocacy really, saw this, preempted it, saw it before it was something, and is really hoping to move this forward and make a difference in California for these school children. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much, and all the best for the holidays.